My friends, tomorrow is the start of the NFL's legal tampering period before the new league year begins on Wednesday. Pretty much the unofficial beginning of NFL free agency. And today on Steelers Talk, I'm going to be explaining why I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers will be putting in a bid to sign quarterback Malik WIllis tomorrow. Also talk about Aaron Rodgers and how I still think that he's in the mix here. But I also believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers will be in play to sign Malik WIllis tomorrow if he wants to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Now, before we get into the content today, talking about the latest surrounding the quarterback situation here in Pittsburgh, we are going to be going live tomorrow before free agency begins at 12 p.m. Eastern Time at 11 a.m., where we're going to be doing an hour of pregame coverage. Then, of course, we'll be, going with the punches and rolling with the punches here as these signings come in. Okay, guys, so we will be live pretty much all day tomorrow on the first day of the legal tampering period. I'm guessing the Steelers will have some sort of solution at the wide receiver 2 position by the end of the day tomorrow. And who knows, they might even have their quarterback figured out as well. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button, because tomorrow is going to be a big day for the 2026 Pittsburgh Steelers and who they're able to land on the free agency market. If they're able to make a big trade of some kind, we're going to be covering it all live here on the channel. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button for our extensive and free Steelers free agency coverage over the next week. So let's talk about Malik WIllis here, guys. And Malik is going to be 27 years old next season, so still very young, 225 pounds at 6'1", pretty decent size for somebody that maybe isn't the tallest quarterback in the world. And obviously coming out of Liberty, he was seen as somebody that's a big-time playmaker with a big arm, dynamic rushing ability, and he did have a small but a very impressive sample size as the starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers last season, playing in both Chicago and playing very well in that situation in relief of an injured Jordan Love, and then at Lambeau Field played very well against the Baltimore Ravens in a game where they ended up losing, but he finishes the season with 30 of 35 there. 422 yards passing, 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. Just really, really good efficiency there. And by the way, guys, he was throwing the ball down the field, like deep shots to Romeo Doubs, perfectly placed seam balls to guys like Christian Watson. He was making plays out of structure. Like, he looked like, in that short stint that he was the starting quarterback of the Packers last year, he looked like a top 10 NFL quarterback. Now, obviously, it's a super small sample size, so there's a little bit of a risk there if the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be bringing him in, and particularly if they're going to pay him a lot of money to be this team's starting quarterback moving forward. And coming up here on the show, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of potentially signing Malik WIllis. How much should the Steelers offer for him? And then where does Aaron Rodgers fit into this whole discussion? We're going to be discussing all that later in the show here, guys. But what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Would signing Malik WIllis be a good idea for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our friends at Polymarket. While I tell you about our sponsor today, simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comments. Before we continue on with today's video, here's what I've been trading on Polymarket recently. During Week 18's Pittsburgh-Baltimore matchup this past year, Polymarket gave Pittsburgh just a 38% chance to win, which I thought was crazy because of how this game almost always goes down to the wire. So I saw some value here with this game on Polymarket, and for that reason, I took Pittsburgh at 38% to win that game, and $100 won me $263. Plus, with Polymarket, you can trade in and out of momentum shifts without getting blocked or penalized. And with in-game trading, once Pittsburgh gets up, I can either ride it all the way to the end of the game and get more money, or I could sell early and get a nice payout early before the game even finishes. For example, if I bought Pittsburgh at 38% and sold at just 70%, I could have snagged a cool $184 payout. You can't do this with traditional sports books, so get started today. Polymarket is legal in all 50 states. Download the app now to get to the top of the wait list. The only way to do that is by clicking my link in the description and comments below. And a big thank you to Polymarket for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. Now, to kind of catch you guys up on what the quarterback situation has looked like so far here in Pittsburgh this offseason, the Pittsburgh Steelers have provided Aaron Rodgers plenty of opportunity to lock himself in as this team's QB1 in 2026. Both head coach Mike McCarthy and GM Omar Khan have said that they've left the door open for Rodgers to make a decision to not only come back to play in the NFL for yet another season in his age 43 campaign, but also to be the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They did something similar with Justin Fields last year, where they offered him a 2-year, $30 million contract, $15 million per season, and then Justin Fields decided not to take that, and he ended up going to the New York Jets. And it looks like, just like Fields last year, Rodgers is going to be hitting the open market when the legal tampering period opens up tomorrow. Here's what Steelers GM Omar Khan had to say about that situation.
The door's open to have Aaron back. I've had conversations with him. I spoke to him last week. Mike McCarthy spoke to him, and he knows how we feel about him. And it's right now we're proceeding. He's a free agent and he's not on the roster. So, but he knows how we feel about him.
So obviously Aaron hasn't taken Omar and Mike up on that opportunity to walk through that door, so to speak, and sign on to be the Steelers starting quarterback in 2026, at least not yet. And, it makes you think, what could be the reasons why Rodgers has not signed on the dotted line, at least not yet? The first reason could be he wants to see what Pittsburgh does to fill out the offensive roster. This is something that Mark Kaboli, for example, has theorized over the last several days, is that he wants to see which wide receiver, too, the Pittsburgh Steelers bring in. What do they bring back? Kenneth Gainwell? Like, what moves do they make offensively? Who's going to be the starting left guard next year before he officially signs on for another season as the Steelers starting quarterback at age 43? Then another reason why he might be waiting to make an official decision is that he might want to hear out other teams, probably the Minnesota Vikings, because apparently he wanted to go to Minnesota last year, and Kevin O'Connell wanted him, apparently, according to some reports. But Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who has now been fired as the Vikings GM, was the one to shut that down. But now that Kwesi has been fired and now KOC is really running the ship this year, is it possible that after a really lackluster season from J.J. McCarthy last year that they could bring in Rodgers? Obviously, I would say an agreement can still be met with Aaron Rodgers here before the legal tampering period. I'm pretty sure Omar and Mike have told Aaron Rodgers, listen, man, if you want to sign a contract at any point before free agency begins, you will be our starting quarterback next year. You are our number one quarterback option heading into the offseason, so the job is yours if you want it. But I really won't be surprised if we hear Aaron Rodgers to Minnesota whispers tomorrow, especially because Kyler Murray, the guy that's been really connected to the Minnesota Vikings in recent days, can't be signed by Minnesota until Wednesday. So is it possible that Kevin O'Connell, has conversations with Aaron Rodgers starting tomorrow? I mean, we didn't really get official word that Rodgers was interested in the Steelers until the first day of free agency, when, of course, there was that blockbuster report from Adam Schefter saying that Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers were having conversations. Is it possible we get something similar about Kevin O'Connell and Aaron Rodgers tomorrow? I do think that is possible, and that's going to be something I keep my eye on heading into tomorrow. But maybe Minnesota really is just locked in on Kyler Murray like everybody says that they are. Like, maybe they feel like Kyler Murray, is that, short-term solution there to try and get the most out of that football team with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and that great defense led by Brian Flores as DC. Maybe they are locked in on Kyler Murray, and I would assume that Aaron Rodgers, shortly after the legal tampering period begins tomorrow, is going to learn that after he's allowed to talk with Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings. They might say, hey, we appreciate your interest in us, but we're kind of locked in on Kyler Murray at the moment. And if that's the case, if Rodgers wants to play here in 2026, and it certainly seems like he does, like he's staying in shape, he says he's going to go through the process of free agency like any other player would. It does seem to me like Rodgers wants to play, and if Minnesota is kind of shutting down any idea of him going there, I do think Rodgers signs on the dotted line here in Pittsburgh pretty darn quickly, especially if they sign Romeo Doubs or if they bring in that legitimate wide receiver too that I'm guessing he's looking for. But I'll say this right now, guys, I don't think Pittsburgh is going to let Aaron Rodgers prevent them from submitting offers for other quarterbacks. Like, this was the case last year, right? They had that offer submitted to Justin Fields. They also put in an offer for Sam Darnold. Obviously, they didn't get either one of those quarterbacks, and then eventually got to the point where they pretty much had to wait for Aaron Rodgers, so they did, and Rodgers ends up signing on the dotted line, and the rest is history. We go to the playoffs, we win a division, and now we're in this situation. But this is what GM Omar Khan had to say at the Combine about not letting this thing drag out like it did last year.
Yeah, I think the circumstances are a little different, but just conversations we had, I think neither side wants to have this drag on like it did last year.
And I think a big reason why Omar doesn't see this thing dragging on like it did last year is because he probably plans on landing a quarterback of some variety on the first week of free agency, and maybe that quarterback is not Aaron Rodgers. I think Pittsburgh is going to offer every quarterback that they see as a quote-unquote bona fide QB1 option. What I mean by bona fide is somebody that can sign on the dotted line here in Pittsburgh and not be challenged for the starting position. All right, somebody that doesn't need to go through a competition with Will Howard to get the job, for example. And I think that there's 3 of those guys in this free agency class. Aaron Rodgers, who they've obviously already offered. Number 2, Kyler Murray, who's not available until Wednesday. And then number 3, it's Malik WIllis, who is available to sign for the Pittsburgh Steelers tomorrow. And the way that it's going to kind of work here, guys, is that if the Steelers feel that Malik WIllis is a legit QB1 option for them, and for me, I would consider him a legit QB1 option after what he showed last year in Green Bay, they'll send him an offer. Now, maybe it's possible if they don't see him as a bona fide QB1 option, maybe they feel like he's way too expensive and they're not even going to try to get him. That's absolutely a possibility. But if I were the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would at least see what the market looks like for Malik and what they're looking for in a contract. And personally, I would be excited to sign Malik WIllis here in Pittsburgh. Like, I will say the floor is a little bit lower than some of these other options, but also the ceiling, you could argue, is as high as anybody that they could realistically acquire at the quarterback position this offseason. Not only is he still relatively young at 27 years old, but he's got a dynamic physical skill set. This is why a lot of people were mocking him in the top 5 of the NFL draft just a few years ago. Of course, the Steelers ended up taking Kenny Pickett in that draft, and Malik ended up going in round 3. But the dynamic physical skill set is still there. He's got a rocket arm. He can throw on the run, can throw off platform. He's got incredible, escapability and then dynamic rushing ability, can make people miss in space, can rip off long runs with his legs. And, I think that his playmaking instincts are really outstanding. This was one of the things that really stood out to me in his time at Liberty, is that when he would get outside the pocket, like, he would just make stuff happen that you just would not believe. And I think that we saw a little bit of that in Green Bay last year as well. And then because he played in 2 cold weather games last year in Chicago and then in Green Bay in the 2 games he played in, or at least got multiple snaps in, he showed that he could play in an environment like the AFC North where he can handle those colder conditions and play very, very good football. Also, he's a potential long-term answer. Obviously, he's only 27 years old, so if he works out here, you get probably at least a decade of Malik WIllis playing like high-level NFL starting quarterback play for you. And then also, he's not that expensive, all right? Like, he's expected to go somewhere in the range of $50 to $60 million over 2 years, about $30 million per season, maybe 25. I think he's going to get more than what Justin Fields got last year, but compared to the other quarterbacks in the league, guys, that's like not even cracking the top 15, and arguably, like, by the end of the offseason, that might not even be cracking the top 20. So he's not that expensive to acquire either. But the big question for Pittsburgh is, will Pittsburgh's offer be big enough? Like, whatever their offer is, like, they've spent all offseason coming up with a number to, offer Malik WIllis and kind of put their hat in the ring here. And then the question's going to be, does Malik WIllis see Pittsburgh's offer as the best that he's going to get tomorrow? Because I do think Malik will make his decision by the end of the day tomorrow, and he might be the big quarterback chess piece that's taken off the board tomorrow afternoon. Now, some of the other teams that have been linked to Malik WIllis, teams like the Arizona Cardinals, who have Mike LaFleur, the brother of Matt LaFleur, who was obviously the head coach for WIllis in Green Bay. Also, Nathaniel Hackett is the OC there in Arizona. He's coming over from Green Bay, knows Malik personally. Certainly possible they could throw a lot of money at Malik WIllis to be their starting quarterback. Miami has been a team that has obviously been linked to Malik as well, with Jeff Hafley coming over from the Packers and all that different stuff. I don't know if Miami has the funds to give Malik WIllis the contract that he wants, but I guess we'll see. And then Cleveland's another team that has apparently been interested in Malik WIllis and might make a play for WIllis tomorrow afternoon. Now, I would say I would sign WIllis for 2 years, $55 million, with $35 million of that being guaranteed, and that's the most that I'd be willing to offer. Obviously, I hope that the Steelers could maybe even get him for even less than that. Like, if they could get him for $45 million or $50 million over 2 years, that would be great. But I really don't want to have to pay or get Malik WIllis on a contract that's more than 2 years, because I don't want to be tied to him for more than 2 years, and I don't want the guaranteed money to be astronomical heading into the second year of his contract. I want to be able to get out of that contract in the second year if he doesn't work out in the first year here in Pittsburgh. And for me, that would be a solid bet, because if Malik Willis succeeds, you have a franchise quarterback for at least the next half decade before you have to start worrying about his athleticism waning, and you can extend him next offseason, and he's your guy moving forward in the Mike McCarthy era. But if he fails in the first year here in Pittsburgh, you can cut him next offseason for a lower dead cap hit, like $5 to $10 million against the cap next year. That wouldn't be detrimental, especially because you'd probably be drafting a quarterback in the 2027 NFL draft anyways. But guys, Willis has legitimate top 10 quarterback potential. All right, he showed that potential last year. It's not, actualized yet. Like, he hasn't established himself as a top 10 starting quarterback in the league. He's going to have to prove that wherever he goes to next. But if I'm Malik Willis, guys, and I'm looking at Arizona, a team that's an upstarting team with new management, all that different stuff, haven't been good in years. If I'm looking at the New York Jets, if I'm looking at the Miami Dolphins, another team that's rebuilding, if I'm looking at the Browns, another team that's definitely rebuilding with a new head coach, if I'm Malik and I want to resurrect my career and I want to establish myself as a starting quarterback in the National Football League, the Pittsburgh Steelers, compared to the other teams that we talked about being interested in him, I think is clearly the best situation for a quarterback. So it wouldn't shock me at all if Malik Willis wants to become a Pittsburgh Steeler tomorrow afternoon. And if he ends up being the next Steelers starting quarterback, I'm going to be excited for the future here in the Steel City. So now give me your best down there in the comment section. What is the most that Pittsburgh should be willing to offer Malik Willis tomorrow? I think the most that I'd be willing to offer is 2 years, $55 million total, with $35 million of that being guaranteed. Let me know your number down there in the comment section, or maybe the answer is zero. I wouldn't offer him. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Now, I want to finish up today's show by being absolutely clear that I still think heading into tomorrow that Aaron Rodgers is Pittsburgh's number one choice to be their starting quarterback in 2026. And there's a reason why the Steelers left the door open for Rodgers to sign that extension and to re-up and get another year here in Pittsburgh and lock himself in as this team's starter before the start of free agencies, because they feel like he gives this team the best chance to win next year. And how I kind of think of it, guys, is that even though Aaron Rodgers doesn't have the youth or the playmaking ability that Malik Willis has, he does have a higher floor heading into next year than Malik does, and he has a ceiling that, in my opinion, is not that far off from Malik Willis. Like, obviously, Willis, if he really plays well, he could be the next star quarterback in the NFL, but Aaron Rodgers, I believe, still has it in him to play very, very good football, especially if this team can put the proper receiving weapons around him, something that this team did not do for him during the 2025 season. Remember, a 43-year-old Tom Brady won a Super Bowl less than a decade ago in Tampa Bay. And by the way, the head coach in Tampa Bay was a 60-plus-year-old Bruce Arians. So you're telling me a 60-plus-year-old Mike McCarthy with a 43-year-old Aaron Rodgers, it's impossible for them to go on a run, especially if Patrick Graham fixes the defense this next year, especially if this team can add a couple really good receiving weapons for Rodgers to throw to? I'm sorry, man. I don't think it's that far-fetched to think that Aaron Rodgers, who elevated this offense from a really bad unit to like a league average unit with pretty much zero wide receiver help last year, I think that if you get him a couple more good receiving weapons, this could be a legitimate top 10 offense in football next year. And if the defense follows suit and they're a great unit, I think that this could be one of the more well-rounded teams in football, and Rodgers could put this team in contention to win a 7th Lombardi trophy. And my take on the situation, guys, is that Aaron Rodgers gives Pittsburgh their best chance to win next year. And I think that, he can get this franchise to that 2027 NFL draft class where the quarterbacks are supposed to be plentiful in the first round. Now, here's a list of 10 guys that could potentially be first-round dudes. All right, and that's a lot of high-caliber guys. Arch Manning, Dante Moore, Lenoris Sellers, Julian Sayin, Darian Mensah, John Mateer, Brandon Sorsby. A lot of these guys I really like, especially maybe Sam Levitt, who's going to LSU. Like, all these guys I think have potential first-round pedigree in them. And I would say by the time that we get to the end of the process here, I don't think it's going to be like this year where there's a bunch of players that are supposed to go round one and then all of them disappoint or get injured. Like next year, we're going to be looking at somewhere between 4 to 6 first-round quarterbacks, and the Steelers are going to have options to trade up and, get their guy no matter how good they do during the 2026 NFL season. And, we are waiting for the future here in Pittsburgh. There's no doubt about that, but you can try and win now while also preparing for that future, right? And I know a lot of Steelers fans are tired of the short-term solutions, right? Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, doing Rodgers again for a second straight year, doing a short-term solution for a third straight year. People are tired of that. But it does make sense to maybe go down that road one more time because the quarterback options in the draft next year are supposed to be so plentiful. So in terms of how tomorrow is going to work, guys, I expect offers to be submitted to both Aaron Rodgers. I believe that offer has already been extended. A contract hasn't been offered, but the offer to sign a contract with the Steelers has been extended. And then they will also extend an offer to Malik Willis. And essentially the way it's going to work is first come, first serve. The first person to accept the Steelers' deal is going to get the position. Now, I think the Steelers would prefer Aaron Rodgers, but if Rodgers is still being coy and Malik Willis is excited to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers tomorrow, I could see Pittsburgh agreeing to terms with Malik Willis to become their next franchise quarterback. And listen, man, if Willis goes elsewhere tomorrow, which is possible, it sounds like Arizona is going to make a pretty hard play for him. Pittsburgh could put in a bid on Kyler Murray on Wednesday, especially because it's just the vet minimum. Like if Rodgers is still not deciding at that point and Kyler Murray wants to come be a Pittsburgh Steeler, or maybe Rodgers goes to Minnesota early in the week and then Kyler Murray, lo and behold, is just sitting there on Wednesday looking for a team, and you got the Pittsburgh Steelers with Mike McCarthy and a couple good receivers and a good defense, and it's certainly possible that we could get to Wednesday and Kyler Murray could be an option for the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. But if the Pittsburgh Steelers miss on both Malik Willis and Kyler Murray and Rodgers still hasn't made his decision, there's going to have to be a discussion in the tail end of this week of just how long the Steelers are going to be willing to wait on a Rodgers decision before they turn to a quote-unquote bridge veteran heading into this offseason, right? Are they willing to wait maybe a couple more days, maybe a couple more weeks, months for Rodgers to sign because he's the best quarterback option on the market at that point? Or do they go with one of these bridge options, someone like a Geno Smith, who, by the way, has established chemistry with DK Metcalf and would probably sign for the vet minimum? Andy Dalton, who you'd have to trade for likely, but somebody that's played in Mike McCarthy's system and he's developed young quarterback talent before as a mentor. You got Joe Flacco, who could complete the infinity gauntlet here in Pittsburgh. Kirk Cousins and Jacoby Brissett, some other options that you could consider. Obviously, Brissett's still under contract with Arizona, but they might release him. Also, I'm sure he's gettable in a trade. But another emergency option, if you want like a quote-unquote starting caliber guy, is Derek Carr. He has been out of the league for a year, and that scares the living shit out of me because quarterbacks that take years off usually come back and they're terrible, and Derek Carr wasn't exactly the best quarterback in the league when he left. He was a starting caliber guy. He's got a pretty decent arm, smart guy as well. If Rodgers, Malik, and Kyler are off the board, I guess you can think about a Derek Carr trade, but that's definitely like the worst case scenario as far as I'm concerned at the quarterback position. But at the end of the day here, guys, my best guess is that Aaron Rodgers at some point this week before Thursday is officially going to decide to return to the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2026. It might even be tomorrow. It's possible that he has a meeting or a phone call with Kevin O'Connell tomorrow, and they're like, yeah, we're really interested in Kyler. Maybe if we can't get Kyler and he decides to go elsewhere, we'll sign you, but we're really interested in Kyler. Maybe at that point, Rodgers is like, fine, you guys don't want me in Minnesota, I'll just re-sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially if they've already signed Romeo Doubs, who he's played with in Green Bay. If they re-sign Kenneth Gainwell, for example, and the table is set for Aaron Rodgers here in Pittsburgh. I'm sure that could happen tomorrow, but it could also be a couple days. So make sure you buckle your seatbelts, guys, because it's going to be an interesting ride to see who the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to be next season. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. Who's going to be Pittsburgh's QB1 for next season? Is it going to be Aaron Rodgers? That's my best guess right now, but I would say the chances of it being Rodgers are as low as they've been in weeks at this point. Malik Willis is also on the table. Kyler Murray, Derek Carr, Geno Smith, Will Howard. Who do you think is going to be the starter Week 1 next year? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments. That'll be it for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors. rumors just before the start of NFL free agency. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we will see you guys tomorrow for the start of our live coverage of NFL free agency. It all starts at 11 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, so make sure you guys click that subscribe button, turn on those notifications. Until tomorrow, guys, here we go, Steelers.